Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. The theme today is crazy online dating stories that will scare you from ever wanting to meet someone online. However, of the 3 stories that I'm going to share, only 2 of them are true, and 1 is entirely fake. By the end, you'll have the chance to guess which one was made up and which 2 are real. I would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Let's begin with story number 1. Online date turned sinister. Sydney, 24, was described by most of her friends as a loyal and kind person. At work, where she worked as a cashier, she was dependable and responsible, the kind of employee any store manager would want to have on their shift, and any other workers would be happy to have as their coworker. Needless to say, Sydney was well liked among her employees, friends, and her family. So when one day, in November of 2017, she never showed up to work, people immediately contacted the police, believing that something must have been wrong. When police arrived at Sydney's place, initially they reported to the family that there was no sign of a break-in. The family was a bit relieved, but not for long, as that still didn't tell them what happened to their daughter. Sydney seems to have disappeared. All calls to her cell led to nothing. Eventually, they moved the search to online. It was revealed that Sydney had been talking with a girl she had met on Tinder. They had already had a date, and a selfie that Sydney had posted with the caption, "Ready for my date," led most to believe that she was meeting up with this woman for date number 2. Soon, the FBI even got involved, and it was discovered the name of the woman that Sydney was speaking with. Her name was Bailey, a 23-year-old female. At this time, they also discovered the last place that Sydney's phone had pinged. It was determined to be the apartment of Bailey. However, it was not just Bailey that lived in this place. She also lived with her boyfriend, a 53-year-old man named Aubrey. These 2 had an extensive criminal record, but no violence was in their record, mostly just theft and scams. This led many to be extremely scared for Sydney's well-being at this point, and police made their way to Aubrey and Bailey's apartment. Upon arrival, the apartment was empty. But after obtaining a search warrant, it was not empty of unsettling evidence. When they went into the basement, they had an overpowering smell of bleach, and they also found a dog collar, which is only alarming because according to the landlord, they never owned a dog. Duct tape, a plastic cloth, a drop cloth, zip ties, and oddly, a book on anatomy were also found. Aubrey and Bailey, they were nowhere to be found. Then, strangely, videos of the couple began surfacing online, mostly of them claiming their innocence. Bailey said she smoked drugs with Sydney and Aubrey, admitting to theft but not murder. They said they dropped Sydney off at a friend's house. Police were then able to track the couple's location. They had traveled over 400 miles from their apartment, but they were actually arrested on a previous warrant. Nevertheless, the couple was now in custody. Police were then able to use Bailey's phone to track her steps on the day of their date. Oddly, she had traveled over 200 miles over various dirt roads. When police retraced their trail, no one expected what they would find. I'm warning viewers now, this is not easy to listen to. Police found 13 total different garbage bags, each of them containing parts of Sydney in them. When they confronted Bailey and Aubrey, Aubrey immediately admitted to being responsible for her death, and that Bailey had no part of it. He said he accidentally killed her in a consensual sexual act that went too far. Him, along with 2 other females, neither of which were Bailey though. However, Police didn't buy any of it, as the two were seen buying the objects mentioned earlier hours before the date. They were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper dismemberment of a body. During the trial, more incredibly, weird truths about Aubrey and Bailey were discovered. 3 other witnesses, who are all anonymous, said that Aubrey believed that he was a vampire. He ran a cult, and he would pay these women well to remain a member of their cult, but they had strict rules that they had to follow. Aubrey even tried to slit his own throat during his trial, but was not successful. In the end, he stuck to his story, that it was simply an accident and Bailey was innocent. The jury found both Aubrey and Bailey guilty on all 3 counts, and Aubrey was given the death sentence. Though he never admitted it, it was mostly believed that on that fateful night, Sydney did willingly come to Bailey's apartment, but had no idea Aubrey would be there. When she refused to join his cult, he killed her, and the couple then dismembered her body and spread her remains in 13 different garbage bags and fled. Aubrey still sits on death row today and still claims that he acted alone. Story number 2. Late Night Date. MK, born in 1996, was a bright young girl with a very positive future. She was very active in sports throughout high school, mostly sports that brought her into the water, from being on the swim team or the water polo team. She was also raised with a religious family, being an active member in her church. MK believed her career would be in the world of helping people, whether that be through being a nurse or maybe even in medical school. She was majoring in kinesiology, but also taking a pre-nursing course. Those who knew her well knew she was bound to do great things. Some still wonder if MK had a different side to her, based on one small fact about her decision to try online dating. Most didn't believe there was anything wrong with online dating, but it was the website that MK decided to use. It was a site called Seeking Arrangement, which, more or less, is specialized in people seeking a sugar daddy. This didn't fit with MK's personality, but nevertheless, she was on this site and eventually started talking to someone named Jerome. Jerome, 31, seemed very polite and charming to MK, but he was hiding something very unsettling about his life from before. At one point, he had attempted to hire a contractor to build a soundproof room in his house with a fingerprint entry. He claimed it was to hide alcohol from his girlfriend, but he also requested a bunch of meat hooks to be placed in the room as well. The contractor turned away from performing this job. Nevertheless, on June 17th of 2019, Jerome and MK had set up for a date. She was returning from California, where she had attended her grandmother's funeral, and her flight was set to land in the early morning. She was picked up by a Lyft driver, and she told the driver to take her to a park near Jerome's home. According to the driver, he was not comfortable dropping the young girl off at 3 a.m. in the park, but she was insistent, and she was meeting a friend there. Jerome met MK in the park. It was their first time meeting in real life, and MK agreed to go with Jerome back to his house. When inside Jerome's home, he wasted no time in his attack. He quickly subdued MK and tied her hands behind her back with zip ties. MK was pleading with him to stop, to just let her go. She wouldn't tell anyone. She just wanted to be set free. Jerome wasn't listening, and he started to choke MK. But she squirmed and she did her best to fight back. However, sadly, there was not much she could do. Jerome then took some hard object and struck MK in the side of the head. He then took a belt and wrapped it around her neck and squeezed. He did this until she passed away. It was later revealed that her death was actually caused by the blow to the head. She was only 23 years old at the time of her murder. Jerome then buried MK in his own backyard and threw her belongings in the local river. The next day, he burned her body, still in his backyard. But when she didn't disappear enough, he brought her to a nearby forest and buried her in a shallow grave. Jerome then returned home and continued on with his life. However, that would not be for very long. Only 3 days after MK and Jerome met for the first time, MK's father reported her missing, saying he had not heard from her for a few days, which was not like his daughter. Only a few days after that, it was traced back to the man that she was meeting in the park at 3 a.m. Police immediately went to Jerome's home, and he wasted no time in confessing to the crime. He didn't seem to show any remorse for what he had done. He showed police the charred bits of MK in the backyard. He even took them to the forest where he buried her body. On July 28th, Jerome was arrested and charged with the kidnapping and aggravated murder of MK. Her family and friends were devastated that they would never be seeing MK again. Over a year after his arrest, MK's trial would begin, and he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and third-degree desecration of a human body. In exchange, they dropped the kidnapping charge, which may have resulted in the death penalty for Jerome. MK had several people speak for her at the trial. Her father was one of them. He was quoted saying, "I will never have the opportunity to see her blossom in life." Jerome was given life in prison, plus 5 years for the desecration of her body. He still sits in prison to this day. Since this trial, more women have come forward claiming acts of assault and violence from Jerome, and has since had 15 years added to his sentence. Jerome did apologize to the family, but no one believed it was sincere. He never fully admitted as to why he committed such a crime. Most believe he did it just because he felt like it. Story number 3. She may never know. Jennifer and Rachel, both living in California in 2016, were two very bright young girls who focused most of their time on school. They were only 18 years old, and partly due to pressure from their parents, but also their own agenda, getting into a good college was something that was very important to them. This also meant that when it came to the dating world, they didn't really have much experience. According to Jennifer, they did get a decent amount of attention from other teenage boys, but that didn't really matter to them. They both were about to graduate from high school and had decided to take 1 year off before applying to college. Jennifer, however, did decide that she wanted to at least try going on a date. Rachel was much less interested in this, but was going to support her best friend anyway. Jennifer didn't know exactly where to start. She didn't play sports or was a part of that many clubs, so she decided to try online dating. She had heard mixed reviews about Tinder, so she decided to try Bumble, as that had a much better reputation. Often the two would swipe together, and according to Jennifer, was swiping no on about 99% of the profiles that she would come across. It ended up getting boring fast for her. Later in the day, when Jennifer was alone though, she went back on Bumble and continued to swipe, having mostly the same luck as before. That was until she came across one profile of a man named Mark. Jennifer described Mark's profile as simple yet eye-catching. He was blonde, blue-eyed, tall, athletic, a fairly typical good-looking guy. He only had one photo though, and the bio itself was mostly blank. Jennifer paused on this profile. Even though there wasn't much to digest, she looked at it longer than she had the previous ones. She decided, why not, and swiped yes on Mark. It was her first time swiping yes on any profile so far, and to no surprise, it was a match. Mark must have swiped yes on her previously. Bumble is one of those apps where the girl has to start the conversation first. So, Jennifer said she wasted no time in messaging Mark, and apparently, he wasted no time in replying. The two talked well into the evening. He was very polite, and he seemed to act like a true gentleman. Jennifer wasn't stupid. She knew that often teenage boys would ask for some inappropriate pictures or something of the like. But Mark didn't do any of that. He did, however, ask to meet for coffee the next day. This seemed a little fast for Jennifer, but she did suggest a public place that was walking distance from her house. She didn't exactly want to tell her parents and ask for a ride. They both agreed. There was a Starbucks close by, and they both settled on 3 p.m. And she couldn't wait to tell Rachel. The next day, she called Rachel in the morning and explained Mark, what he looked like, and just how excited she was to finally have a first date. Even if it was just a simple coffee. Rachel seemed a little distant, Jennifer said, but seemed happy for her nonetheless. At about 1 p.m., Jennifer's day changed from excitement to disappointment. Her parents told her that one of her grandmothers had a stroke, and they all needed to go to the hospital, clearly meaning that Jennifer was going to have to cancel her date with Mark. She was disappointed, but she knew that family came first. She sent him a message, got herself ready, and off she went. She occasionally checked her phone, but no reply from Mark, not even when 3 p.m. had come and gone. It ended up being a late night, and when Jennifer and her family had gotten home, they had a surprise in their driveway. Rachel's dad, Peter, he was standing right there. He was frantic. He claimed he didn't know where Rachel was, and was hoping that Jennifer knew something. However, she hadn't talked to her either. Numerous calls were made to her cell, but no answer. Peter had called the police, and Rachel was declared missing. Police asked Rachel's family and Jennifer many questions, but they seemed to have no leads. According to her dad, she said she was going for a quick walk around 1:30 p.m., but she never made it home. The next day came. Jennifer had not slept at all. She was joining Rachel's family on the search that day. They looked all over the small town that they resided in, constantly calling her phone. Jennifer went off on her own for a little bit. When she was calling Rachel's phone again, she thought she heard a sound coming from the alleyway. When she went down and rang it another time, from a dumpster she heard it clearly. She dove in and she retrieved Rachel's phone. Peter now noticed and joined Jennifer in the alleyway, and he called the police. But before police could arrive, Jennifer, who knew Rachel's lock screen combo, opened her phone to see if she could find anything weird. Other than the hundreds of missed calls, Jennifer noticed something surprising, something that shook her in that very moment. She noticed Rachel also had downloaded Bumble, and when she opened the app, she had matched with Mark as well, and they were to meet the day prior at 2 p.m., only an hour before she was supposed to meet with him herself. She explained this to her father and police, and they took the phone. Jennifer was confused. Why wouldn't Rachel tell her that she was on Bumble too? More importantly, did this Mark guy kidnap Rachel? Sadly, to this day, Rachel has never been found. Police were unable to find the real man behind this profile, most believing it was fake. Jennifer, about 6 months after Rachel had disappeared, found something online that truly horrified her. She learned that sometimes gangs that specialize in trafficking women would use fake profiles on dating apps to lure young females to meet, only to kidnap them and force them into the prostitution world. One of these gangs apparently targeted small towns in California. She gets sick thinking that Rachel is out there somewhere, living this life, unable to escape. She hopes that somehow that isn't what happened to her best friend. Jennifer herself told her story to many people, creating a blog to try and warn other girls about the dangers of online dating. But women are still preyed upon on dating apps. Years later, she often thinks about her friend, if she will ever hear from her again. She does say one more thing in her blog, that her grandmother, who tragically passed away from that stroke, probably saved Jennifer's life. And she would have likely been just another victim. This thought terrifies Jennifer. So that concludes the 3 stories in this week's episode. This one was a bit harder for me to write, but do you know which one was fake? Story number 1, the incredibly strange story of the girl who was dismembered by the couple who lured her to their house. Or 2, the 3 a.m. meetup in the park, which only led to murder. Or 3, the potential kidnapping and selling of an innocent young girl. Let's start with story number 1. Do you think this bizarre story is too weird to make up? You're right. This story is very true. The victim's real name being Sydney Loof, and her killers being Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell. Aubrey really is still on death row today, and Bailey was convicted, but appealed the death sentence. The results of that appeal are still awaiting at the time of this video. Now let's move on to story number 2. The tragic story of the lovely young woman named MK, murdered by the man that she had met online. This story is sadly not made up. It's entirely true. Mackenzie Lueck was her real name, and the murderer's real name being Alua Ajayi. That means that the specifics of story number 3 are entirely false. However, researching this week's episode was tough due to how many online predators exist out there. Please be careful, and I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful day.